everyone. This is Dr. Belinda Wilkerson from Steps to the Future, coming to you with this week's College Conversation. So this week it's College Conversation, so you want to be a career counselor. I am so fortunate to have the guest that we have with us this evening. Now, I always talk to people about the importance of networking when you go to conferences or when you're out and about. And that's actually how I met our guest. He was presenting at a conference at the North Carolina Career Development Association conference a couple of years ago. And I just love what he was presenting on. And we ended up connecting on LinkedIn, which we're going to talk about a little bit in this broadcast. So I really hope that you learn a lot, ask questions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what our guest has to say. So let me bring him on the screen. And we have with us this evening Wade Wesley. Wade is a career counselor at North Carolina State University, and he's also a clinical mental health and addictions counselor with all kinds of licenses and certifications in his name. And he's going to tell us about those and tell us about his career pathway. So Wesley, excuse me, first of all.
It happens all the time.
So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And part of what I'd like to just do is just have you talk about your educational pathway. How did you get to be a career counselor?
Oh, wow. So I say that being a career counselor is not something that students like going to college, like, oh, I'm gonna be a career counselor. I've always dreamed of doing this. This is one of those pathways that just typically tend to find you. And I went to NC State University for undergrad, actually, and I originally was in Maryland and did my freshman year of high school in Maryland, and then moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. When I went to Chapel Hill, the Tigers, not East Chapel Hill, went to Chapel Hill High School, and then went to NC State, but I had no idea what I wanted to do at all. I was very confused. I was what we called then first year college student, which is now exploratory studies. And I really didn't know, like, and I'm a third generation college student on my dad's side. My paternal grandmother was a teacher, went to Virginia State University. My dad went to University of Maryland. My mom went to University of Maryland. But it was just, college is different now, and economy is different now. And to them, it was just, I need to go. It wasn't really explained like why I need to go. It's just like, you need to go to college. You need to get this piece of paper. So I never thought about it really beyond that. And, when you're there, now you have to make these decisions. So I ended up getting into sociology as a major, actually. And that was, it was kind of a situation of just what was available. It was my GPA was not good after my first year of undergrad, and my dad wanted me to do engineering, and that was a no. I had no interest in that, and I thought I wanted to do business, because a lot of times when we don't know what we want, sometimes we say, oh, well, business will make sense. And I was like, oh, let me do that. We needed a pretty good GPA to get into the College of Business, so that ruled that out. And I had skimmed through W.E.B. Du Bois, the souls of Black folks a little bit, and he's a sociologist. And I was like, wow, this will be interesting. I could dive into that. And I actually really do like sociology a lot. I find it really interesting. But I got into it. I never had any internships or anything in college, which was a mistake. And I did work part-time jobs. I paid for my own college education because my dad told me he wasn't paying for the grades that I got. And so I had to pay for everything after my freshman year. And, it put this different focus on things for me. I noticed, like, a term in the career world, we say, like, the world of work. I noticed what the world of work was like. And I did some retail jobs. I worked as a bar manager at a hip hop club that doesn't exist anymore. It's actually an extension of the police station, ironically, in downtown Raleigh. And I really was just trying to figure it out. And if you don't figure out, like, what your interests are, what your strengths are, your weaknesses, what you want to do, someone else will figure that out for you. And someone saw me, a few people saw me, and were like, hey, you have good communication skills. We see these other places you worked at. You should get into business-to-business sales. I did that, business-to-business sales, client relationship management, account management, stuff like that. I did that for almost 10 years. I was good at it. I wasn't good at the cold calling, prospecting piece. I didn't really like that aspect to it, but I was good at like one-on-one, sitting down, working with clients. I was very good at that. Didn't realize I learned a lot of counseling strategies in that. You learn like transactional analysis is a popular counseling strategy. You learn that in that role. And there was a point, I'm trying to condense this as much as possible, but there was a point where I realized I don't want to do this. Like the money was great, but I realized I was the type of person who wanted their vocation, their career to be more aligned with, a sense of fulfillment, like not the place of fulfillment, but a piece of fulfillment. And then I started exploring things. I started doing informational interviews with friends and friends of friends and people I met on LinkedIn, and took a bunch of different assessments. And, I noticed that a lot of folks that I know like owned their career. Like they could always rely on their law degree or their background in music or their background in sports, and I didn't have that. And I wanted to own it. So I went to grad school at North Carolina Central University and got a master's in career counseling and a master's in clinical mental health. I really thought I wanted to do clinical mental health. I just took the admission into the program under the career track, just knowing I was just going to transfer out of that and go to mental health because I wasn't interested in the career track. But when I had a career class, I was like, this actually lines up a lot with my experience. That feeling that, early careerists get of like feeling a little bit lost and uncertain and trying to connect the dots. I was like, this is not separate from mental health. This shouldn't be separate. So I just kept it and started working at NC State. And that just randomly just saw this job on Facebook and applied for it. And that's how I started working in the place that I am now. So that is the very, very condensed version of how I got into career counseling. It was something that I realized I really enjoyed from my own experiences of not understanding things, and also wanting to connect mental health aspects to career, which I think is absolutely essential and something that we really don't talk about enough.
Right. So for people that are just joining, if you have any questions, please make sure you put them in the chat box and make sure you throw some emojis out there and show us a little bit of love. So we're here with Wesley Wade, a career counselor at North Carolina State University. And he's explaining to us his career path and how he got to be where he is. So tell me a little bit about, so when I look at your LinkedIn profile, I see all these letters after your name.
Right.
Oh my God, this guy is in school quite a bit. So tell me about what those different certifications are.
Yeah, so I think I have a few of them right here. So I'm a NCC, which is a National Certified Counselor. I am a CCMHC, which is a Certified Clinical Mental Health Counselor. I am a LCMHC, which is a licensed clinical mental health counselor. But that used to be LPC for some people who do know a little bit about this, but the license has changed recently. And I'm also LCAS, which is a licensed clinical addiction specialist. It looks like all these things and stuff like that, but honestly, a lot of them overlap, and it's, yeah. I say that I have all these there because I'm not like a PhD or EdD like yourself. So I put all this, put all that other stuff there. But yeah, those are those licenses and certifications I have.
But I think it's important that people understand that there are these licenses and certifications out there, and there's always ongoing professional development, because we can never be so well versed in our work that we don't need to continue learning. So I think that's the importance of that you continue learning in the field that you're in. So as a career counselor at a college, and actually you're in the College of Sciences, so what does that work look like? What does that mean for students that come into your office?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts, right? So I would say if I had to maybe ballpark, somewhere around 30% of my job is actually me sitting one-on-one and working with students, and virtually sitting one-on-one now. And they might come to me with concerns about resume or cover letter or internships or these things that, are the typical things we associate with a job search. Often, which is a popular saying in career counseling, is, it's always more than a resume, right? And a lot of times I'll just put the resume aside for a little bit and we'll talk about some other things. And, students have a lot of anxieties. This is a very new experience if you're, traditional age student or around that age, and, you're living by yourself, you're out here doing these things, you got to make all these decisions. It feels like every decision has the weight of the world on it. And, working with students through that process of, what does it really mean to have a certain major? Does that mean you have to work in this area? What does it mean if you don't? What does it mean? Excuse me. What does it mean if you want to go to med school, but then realize you don't want to go to medical school? So these are some of the conversations that we have one-on-one. I work with students who are freshmen all the way through PhD. So I have like roughly 4,100 students. And, and I have some of those same conversations with my PhD students. One of the interesting things for the College of Sciences, I would say sciences students, anecdotally from what I've noticed, is a lot of these students were good at these things in high school, right? Like they studied biology or chemistry and they were just good at it. And so they just kept on doing things that they were good at. And they never really thought about like, why are they good at it? Or why do they like it? Or what do they not like? Or, how do I use this going forward? And sometimes, like I said earlier, if you don't figure out what you want, other people will, professors see like this bright young person and they get invited to do research opportunities. And some of those students find themselves in master's and PhD programs and they're like, I don't know why I'm here, because they've just always been good at this thing that a lot of people aren't, in all honesty, right? So there's pride with that. That's a lot of aspects of fulfillment with that. But then they get to this point, because graduate work is tough, as we both know, and it hits you hard, right? So I have some conversations like that. I connect with employers who recruit students, and we do creative programming, whether those are workshops or panels. And I try to target a range of different needs that students express, help students put on career fairs. And I try to look at what are some of the gaps, especially on a campus like NC State, which, I love NC State. Any campus is going to have gaps. That's the point of hiring people that you think are smart and can do the work, is addressing the gaps that are there. And one gap was with students who are autistic. And just to be clear, I use identity first language when I talk about the autistic community, because that is what that community overwhelmingly has stated that is the language that they prefer. Like no group is a monolith. That is the language that they prefer over person-centered language, which we get trained on as counselors. So it's sometimes that switch is hard, but for them, it is part of their identity. It's a piece of who they are, and saying that they are someone with autism is like saying I'm someone with being black, right? Like it is part of who I am. So, and it's part of who they are. So I've been working, and that's something I learned through working with autistic students. And that has become like this really great area. I've even been able to learn more about myself, but helping to connect those students with career opportunities. There's a big gap in interaction with employment experiences and degree-related employment after college for those students. So trying to address those gaps, trying to fit the needs of those students, thinking about the kind of student that I was in undergrad and saying, what did I need during that time? Because there's plenty of needs out there. And, if I can hit that group of students, I just feel like that tide will just raise a lot of ships too. So in a nutshell, that's what I do on campus.
Okay, that's really good. So what advice would you give to students that are first-year college students? I mean, pre-COVID or even, during this time, because you still have to access all of the services that a college offers you. So what advice would you give to students about career services?
To get involved early, that's a really important thing. Like one, there's a few different ways to look at this. You pay tuition to go to this school, and these schools have a wealth of resources. Certainly some schools have more resources than others. That's a whole other conversation. But there's a wealth of resources at these schools, and a lot of times students aren't as engaged with those resources as staff and faculty would like. And the Career Development Center is usually one of the most important, one of the most critical, one of the most valuable resources that is not used on a college campus. Well, I shouldn't say not used to the degree which it really should. We are always working on ways to reach more students. And, during this moment of COVID, it's really the same thing. And it's really cool because it's pushing us outside of our boundaries to do more things virtual. And we need to do more things virtual to reach more students, especially, when you're at the biggest public university in the state of North Carolina. Like, we got a lot of students. But getting connected early. When I was an undergrad, I didn't know that there was a career office. I had no idea what it did. Didn't know it existed until the last semester of my senior year. And my senior year was 3 semesters long. So that was like right at the end. And I was like, man, I wish I knew this existed earlier. We have people who are trained to sit there and help you connect the dots, right? What are the things that you're interested in? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you're passionate about? What are the things that people will pay you for? What's the overlapping area of all those things? Like we have assessments, we have our own individual strategies that we use. We look at market data, we connect with recruiters. Most campuses have some kind of program for like first year or second year students. I mean, there's so many services that your career office on a college campus provides, whether small, mid-size, or large. You just need to get connected early. And that way you at least know what some generalities of what you want. I'll say okay, so in College of Sciences, I get a lot of students who are interested in going to medical school, right? A lot of students, whether medical school, PA school, nursing school, dental school, vet school, whatever it is. There's a lot of requirements that goes into that, right? If you want to go to PA school, you need 1,000 hours of clinical experience. If you want to go to med school, you need 12 to 15 activities. There's a range of things that activities are defined as. You need, at least 4 to 5 shadowing experiences. And there's some certain prerequisite classes that you have to do well in. And really your GPA needs to be at the lowest around a 3.5. And a lot of times students don't know all of that. And they come to me late in their junior year and they're like, yeah, I think I really want to go to medical school. It's like, okay, you can definitely do this. We got some catch-up work to do, and we need to realistically look at what this means, right? If this is something you really want to do, you should be ready for the fact that it's going to take you longer. So I'm not going to tell a student that they can't achieve this dream that they want to do, but we need to be pragmatic and realistic about like where we are in that timeline too.
Right. That is so important. I think back to my days in college, like way back when, being a first generation college student, there weren't conversations at our house about what college was. It was just that
Right.
I knew it was a place I needed to go. And I don't think I ever went to career services because I knew I was going to be a teacher.
Right.
So in my head, you only went to career services if you didn't know what you wanted to do. Or if I just didn't see a need for it for me, and I never went. And it's funny because as time went on and I would talk to people, then especially when I became a school counselor first, and then, I'm talking to kids, and then I'm talking to friends who worked in career services. I'm like, how did I miss that office? I know I was in that building, but I never went in that office. So it's become like this passion of mine to really get kids to understand that. When I worked at Providence College for a while, I used to teach the career information class for school counselors. And one of the things we used to do was to take a field trip to career services on campus. Many of them, as undergrad students, they hadn't gone into career services, didn't realize all the services that were available to students. I said, okay, you're going to go into school counseling. You need to be able to talk about this with your students. So for me, career counseling is essential. Like, people say, oh, we're going to college. I see it, but when you get out of college, you're going to work.
Right.
So you have to know what that looks like and what that means for you.
Exactly. I put that into the category of like career exploration, and we don't do a very good job of career exploration in the U.S. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of countries that don't either, but we just don't, and you think about what you knew were career options when you stepped into undergrad, or even when you were like a junior or senior in high school. You probably didn't know a whole lot past doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher, firefighter, police officer, construction worker, business person. We just put a general label on that. But there's so many jobs, right? And they change. Some jobs, go away, new jobs come up. And we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about that. And that it's really a detriment when students get to a 4-year university. And a 4-year university and a vocational college are two different things. One's not better than the other. It's not a pejorative statement on vocational colleges. I know plenty of people who go to vocational schools, and that's great, but they're two different things, right? And so those people who go to like a vocational school are going there for a very specific thing, right? They want to learn a certain skill and go directly into that field. But a 4-year university, it ain't always 4 years anymore. You might go directly into that field, but you're getting experience, right? And something I tell my students, when you graduate from a 4-year university with a bachelor's degree, let's just say like biology, are you now an expert in biology?
Right.
It's like, no, heck no, right? Like you're not. You're a generalist. You have a general understanding of things, and the people who recruit you know this too. So if you are a generalist who is not an expert, what skills are important then? Well, it's like leadership skills, verbal communication, written communication, collaboration, the ability to follow directions. You can get those experiences from a wealth of opportunities, right? And so you should be using your 3 to 4 to 5 years in undergrad, like exploring different career opportunities. And it's that, so that career exploration piece is huge. And it's the biggest obstacle that I face in dealing with students, whether they're undergrad or grad school, honestly.
All right. That is so interesting. So we actually have a question from an audience member.
Hey, Debelina. I know Debelina.
So how do we cultivate the love of learning in our teenagers? And she says she works with homeless youth, many of who have no love of learning or school. And how do you motivate them to learn a skill and pursue a career that will provide a stable job and a living wage? That's huge.
That's a really good question. So I don't know if it's okay for me to say it or not, so I won't say it. But Debelina works for a nonprofit that I've done some work with as well, and it's some career work with some of the teenagers who've been over there. And that love of learning for a teenager is sometimes a tough thing, and it is there, but they don't always know that it is there too, right? The other aspect of this is motivation. How do we motivate them to learn a skill and pursue a career that will provide a stable job? There's a lot of different ways, right? So there's not that you have to do therapy, but there's a therapy style that I really like, for working with young people and college students about these career situations. It's the reality therapy model, where it focuses on what do you want, what are you currently doing, well, what's your plan, and then evaluating that plan. And there's like all these different intricacies of how you navigate this, but that's the basic of it, and the basics of that any of us can use. So talking to these young people and just helping them identify what they want. A lot of them really haven't sat down and spent the time thinking about, what do you want? And we ask the question in another way that I think is not helpful to students. We say, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I'll be 38 in December. I don't know what I want to be. That question is incredibly overwhelming. And if you talk, especially if, like, for folks who are like neurodivergent, like if you're autistic or you're ADHD like me or other things, like we're thinking like all these different, like, oh, they could mean this, they could mean that. And it's an overwhelming question. Also, we know currently people in the US pre-COVID, I don't know how COVID will impact this, although I have guesses, but people have, between 3 to 4 careers over their lifetime on average in the US per the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so it's trending towards 5. 20 plus years ago, that was closer to 3, that was closer to 2. And so a job and career are not the same thing, right? I can have multiple jobs within the same career, but if we're going to have 3 to 4 careers over a lifetime, that means it's not about what I want to be. It's understanding, what do I want from life? Do I want a career that fulfills my passions, or do I want a career that funds my passions? Both of those are equally healthy ways to look at something like that. So the first step is working with that student to help them understand what do they just want out of life? Like, what kind of neighborhood do you want to live in? Do you want to have a family one day? Do you want to travel the world? Like, what kind of things do you want? That's a way to help put some boundaries around the what do you want question when people say, I don't know. Well, I don't know, right? Because then you're like, well, where do I go? Everybody wants some things, right? And they're just not being 100% with you about what they want. So let's use some good open-ended questions and just think about what that person wants and say, okay, well, sounds like you're not super concerned with money, but you want to be comfortable where you can have things and you can, give when needed and live in a comfortable neighborhood, however you define that. And doing some travel would be nice. And also, you say that you like being around people, but you really want to have a job where you can just kind of be left alone to do your thing. Well, let's think about what that really means and looks like, right? And so you're helping to guide them through this process to where eventually you're pulling out some ideas. Well, hey, what do you do for fun? Like, when you're not in class, what do you do for fun? What classes have you enjoyed, or what pieces of your classes have you actually enjoyed? Oh, I like recess. Okay, all right. Well, what aspects of it, right? Like, because some people are playing sports, some people are just talking to their friends, some people are doing other stuff. There's always another layer of questioning in there, right? And it can be challenging to talk to teenagers, and you just have to be patient and know that they're going to try to push your buttons and they're going to try to ask you a question to stump you. I promise that we can do this. We can think ahead of the answers that we know we're going to get. And when they ask those, hit them back with a deeper question of reflection. So now we got this concept, a general concept of what they want. Okay, well, let's look at what you're doing now. How does that, could you keep doing the things that you're doing now and hit those areas, right? And you probably not, right? So there's a disparity between what you're currently doing and what you want. Well, now it's time to make a plan, right? And so, a plan might just be, look, well, let's find some ways where we can explore to learn about some other career paths that would allow you to do some of those things. Let's think about some online programs that are free where you can learn coding or you can play around in your own web space. And so there's other things that we can do. And then you just kind of help them with that plan. But it's that's where it starts. Like, when you allow people to explore their interests and really take a moment to think seriously, because look, teenagers, young adults, it's hard to think about 10 years from now. It's theoretical. I mean, it's theoretical for everyone, but as you get older, you really understand the impact of time a lot better, right? Hence the phrase, youth is wasted on the young. We would all do things a little bit differently with the hindsight we have now, right? So like the piece of pursuing a career, a stable job, a living wage, that will come naturally when you're doing these other things, right? And so, anything that you can do to help get someone in front of what they're interested in. You might not think it's what they should be looking at. It's not you, right? You gotta take yourself out of it. And then, just be creative and be flexible. That is like my general answer for that. But you really need to individualize it to the people that you're working with.
Yeah, I agree so much with that. I think back to, my days as a classroom teacher, teach social studies, and as a school counselor. So when we look at the American School Counselor Association model, school counselors are supposed to be working in the domains of academic, personal, social, and career development. And we knew, and it still is probably to this day, that the career domain was the weakest part of the work that we did, because there wasn't time in the school day. We talked about career awareness, career development, career exploration. But when you only have so much time in the school day, and plus, once No Child Left Behind came along and all those
Right.
test things, if it's not tested, it's not taught.
Right.
So that's what we started seeing, and it's just. And the other thing that I'm seeing is, when I was a kid growing up, I always had a job.
Right.
A
Right.
lot of kids don't work. You know,
That's really common now. Yeah.
yeah, the jobs that were available for teenagers are now a lot of times taken by adults who are taking entry level jobs because that's what the workforce is looking like these days.
Mhm.
So I'm finding kids don't even have job skills. I tend to ask my kids, I don't talk to them about, what major do you want? It's like, so what kind of problems do you want to solve? What do you want to give back to the community? Like,
It's a
what do you
great question.
see out there that's bothering you that you want to change? So because they get so anxious about, I gotta have a major, I gotta have a major, I gotta have a major. I
Right.
said, no, you not necessarily, but we need to have some direction.
Right. So people eat. That's back to the whole. I don't even know if I finished the thought fully. This is the ADHD running all around. So when the difference between like a vocational school and a 4-year university, which again, they're equal things. They're just two different things. It's not a pejorative statement, but it like people, when you say the word major, people automatically associate it with a certain career. And so it's this expectation of, when I step onto XYZ college campus and I select my major, I'm assigned a box. And within that box are all of the potential jobs that I can have. And that's just not true. You can go to medical school with the English degree as long as you meet all of those requirements, and you actually would become a very interesting candidate. I know students who went into psychology graduate programs or even counseling graduate programs that majored in statistics, and they actually had a unique strength because they could read some of these studies that we read and understand the statistics a lot better than most counselors. I'm in a doctoral program now, expanding my learning and my ability to understand and do research. Statistics is not my strong area. I would love to have someone with that background of statistics. A young student who graduated years ago that I worked with was an industrial engineering major, and he got a really great job in the co-op program that we do at NC State, which is a great program, and got some great experience there. Then got a really cool internship with Tesla. And then he realized he didn't want to do engineering, and he's been a consultant. He has great communication skills. So, it's not, I mean, you do want to think about a major that aligns with things that you're interested in, but it doesn't mean that you have to work in that major. It means you're going to use those skills. And people throw around the whole loose statistic of, oh, most people don't even work in their degree they get anyway, and they say it like that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, right? That's the way that it is. But your job is to work on that career exploration during that time and really figure that out, and it's overwhelming. Again, we don't do a good job on this career exploration piece, and like anytime I, have a moment in my schedule and I can help encourage high school, middle school students to start exploring careers, it's something that I will gladly do, because you really need to do it. And there's some careers that have timelines. Like, it's just hard to get. It's hard to become a doctor, if I wanted to now at 37 with, a partner who works full time and a kid on the way. Like, it would be ridiculous, right? It could be done, but it would be really hard and be really taxing on everything. So, understanding these things sooner than later is a benefit. There's just a knowledge gap that exists, and we need to help students step in that gap and fill themselves with some of that knowledge, sort of say.
Yeah, I so agree with you. I see, quite a few of my students come to me, and they have some idea of their interests, but a lot of them, they're just like, I don't know. And I know it's because these conversations aren't happening, not to the
Right.
depth they need to happen. So we do spend a lot of time talking about, again, what kind of problems do you want to solve? What do you see out there in the community that bothers you? And we talk about strengths, and we talk about, what do you do in your spare time? It was funny. I was talking to a student the other day, um, and she said, well, maybe psychology, I'm not quite sure. But then as she kept talking, she started telling me about how during this, time of sheltering in place, um, her her passion for looking for knowing about birds and drawing birds and studying birds and the artistic and artistic and creativity behind that. And I'm like, well, see, I didn't know that about you. I said
Right.
that was a whole different tangent. Um, but it was having people just have the opportunity to talk.
Right.
And as you said, to ask those probing questions, to peel back those layers and find out what else is there, because people don't know. I mean, there are adults still trying to figure out
Yes.
what it is they want to do.
I'm one of them. Like, I love what I do now. And well, I tell students all the time, like, okay, if like I asked them that line of question, like, okay, if we have 3 to 4 careers across our lifespan, well, what does that mean for you right now as a junior? And they're like, I guess that while this decision is important, it's not as important as I thought. And I'm like, yeah, it's important, but you're not deciding what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? And you know, um, I'm really big in self-disclosure, like that. People learn from stories, and it's just easy when you're rambling off the top of your head. But for me, I always give the example of, this isn't a career path that, I willfully picked. I learned more about it and I just kind of discovered it and I found it this fit, or it found me, as I say. But I know some of the things I want in a career, right? Like autonomy is super important to me. And I've learned why autonomy is important. Like, you don't just learn your interests, learn why those are your interests. I love autonomy because my ADHD brain needs to be able to manage my time the way I need to manage my time. And when I have managers who give me the grace of being able to manage my own time and the maturity, that's why you hire someone, I'm able to do some really cool things, so autonomy is really important to me. I also like the ability to grow and learn more in a profession, like not just, to become better in that profession, but just in general, right? So it's one of the reasons why I love working on a college campus, because I get to learn all these different things that other people are doing. I never would have learned as much about the autistic community if I hadn't had some students who were autistic and started like reading more studies and then connecting with therapists who work with that community and then just doing some work in that area. So, there's a lot of pressures on these students, and it can be hard to remove yourself from those pressures sometimes and think intentionally about, what it is that I really want to do. And I like that part of my job. Like that's great. However, I know that this isn't like the job that I'm going to be in for 30 years of my life. Like this is something that I love to do, and eventually like I'll grow out of that at some point in time, which is not anytime soon. And that's okay. That's a good thing.
It is. It really is. I mean, my goal, from the time I was 12 years old, I just wanted to be a classroom teacher. I love the whole idea of being in school, and that's what I was for a number of years. But then and I didn't fall into school counseling. We in Rhode Island, we had to, after a certain number of years teaching, you had to have either a master's degree or so many credits. And I said, well, if I'm going to go back to school, I might as well get a degree. And I said, what am I going to do it in? I didn't want to get a master's in history, but I loved. There was something about school counseling I loved. I was fortunate that my junior and senior year in high school, I had 2 school counselors that were fabulous, and my 7th grade counselor was fabulous. My 8th grade counselor was terrible. People that know me know the story about my 8th grade counselor. And I just said, I think that's what I want to do. And, because for me, it was such a blend, it complemented teaching.
Right.
And I loved it. So right now, I own a business as a private college and career counselor, which I never thought I was going to do.
Right.
Never thought I was going to do that. But in moving here and having to pivot and when you talked about autonomy, that like rang a bell with me. I worked at Providence College for about 6 years running a professional development program for school counselors. The best thing about that position that I didn't know I really valued was autonomy. because I
Mm-hmm.
knew supervisors, and I used to go and they say, "So how do you want me to do this?" And they said, "Oh, that's why we hired you. You go figure it out."
Right.
Because in a public school, I always worked in a public school. You don't get that kind of autonomy in a public school.
Right. Right.
So
I would imagine not. Yeah.
So for me, that was amazing. And when I moved here, I initially thought, okay, I want to work back with kids again. So maybe I'll be a school counselor again. But I'm like, nah, I can't have a principal telling me how to do my job.
Right.
I just couldn't do that. And not that I was looking to be a business owner, but at the same time, it was going to satisfy that need for having autonomy and being able to do the job the way that I wanted to do it, not the way someone else told me to do it. So it's been interesting because like you said, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned how to pivot, when
Right.
I thought I was going this way and I went that way. Career development isn't a linear path anymore. It's a lot of this.
It is. It's that. Yeah. 100%. Yep.
Certainly is. And it doesn't stop just because, okay, I've graduated from college. I have a master's. I have a doctorate. This was all after all of that I had.
Right, right. Yeah, that's just the beginning. I don't think students understand that's the beginning of it, because there's this expectation of like you go through all this, you graduate, it's this big ceremony, which is great, and you get this degree, and it's like they just expect like the sky to part and for the sun to shine down upon you and say, here is your golden opportunity. And in reality, like you graduate and you celebrate, and all of a sudden it's just like it's silence. And it's like, what do I do? What do I do now? Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. So when students go to North Carolina State, and after they graduate and everything, are they able to come back and use career services at any time?
Yeah, and a lot of schools do something along those lines. We allow recent graduates up to 1 year to still reach out to their career counselor, to make appointments, to use like all the workshops and stuff. Career fairs are, open for anyone. I mean, we have people who sometimes graduated years and years ago who still come to career fairs. Those are a majority of them are public, and right now, especially in this time, we're obviously very focused on our students who graduated recently and who will be graduating this coming fall and spring. But yeah, they have access to all of the services and people that they had access to when they were students up to 1 year. After that, they can join the Alumni Association, and there's some career counseling services through the Alumni Association and some access to some other things as well through that. At least at State, that's how we work it.
Okay. So what advice would you give to a student that, may be interested in a particular career? So one of the things I always talk to my kids about is if you have an idea that you might want to do this career, I always talk to them about the professional associations that go along with that career. And I said, see if there's a high school chapter or a junior chapter so you can start making those connections early. So I always tell my kids the story of one of my students who wanted to be computer engineer. And I said, hey, you need to think about the National Society for Black Engineers. And I said, there's a high school chapter in your state. He lived in Virginia at the time. He ended up joining and then really kind of pursued it when he went on to college. So we were talking right at the during the summer after his first year in school. And he was doing an internship for Raytheon. I said, how did you get that? And he said, well, through the National Society for Black Engineers. I went to a conference, and I'm at the conference, and I'm talking to this representative from Raytheon and got offered this position. And I'm like, whoa. I said, see, that's a great story, having kids understand the power of networking once they start moving forward.
Yeah, the networking piece is huge. And, when you're young, we can take for granted when we get older that we have a clearer idea of what networking means. And, something I talk about with my students is, I don't envy you being in your 20s, especially early 20s, going through the job search, because the job search is just a miserable process, period, right? That's why we have career counselors and career. It's not like I promise my students that I will always, if not anything, be honest. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat things. So like, okay, hey, we're in a bad situation right now, but we can get out of this. Like we can work towards it. And so I always just tell them, I'm like, hey, the job search is miserable. Like, let's just brace ourselves for that. It's brutal. On average, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US pre-COVID, it's 6 to 8 months. For new undergrads, it tends to be a little bit higher. People hear that and they're like, what? They don't expect that it takes that amount of time. And when your network is like this big, right? It's scary, and you still kind of feel like a kid when you're talking to like these 30, 40, 50, 60 something pluses, and you're scared of like, am I being professional or not? And I'm like, that's normal. When you get to like my age and older, I am who I am. Like you're gonna take me like knowing who I am. I'm not gonna try to pretend to be someone else in an interview, but you got to get to that point, right? And so networking feels a lot different now than it did then. And I stress to students, like, let's get past this nebulous concept of networking. Like if it's my college students, since you've been here at State, have you met one new friend that you didn't know before college? And of course, everyone's going to say yes. Like, well, that's networking, right? So like, how did you meet that person? How did y'all become friends, right? This is the same thing that you're going to model in a different way, but it's the same basics that you're going to model in professional networking, right? And you want to genuinely get to know people. Like, don't get to know people with the agenda of just like collecting resources, but informational interviewing is essentially just finding someone to say, wow, what you do is like super awesome. Like, how do I get involved in that? What did you do? How did you make that transition from student to be a professional? What were some of the obstacles that you encountered early in your career? What advice would you have for someone, like me just starting out? This is great advice, and sometimes you might learn what not to do by talking to some folks as well. We can do these things through LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a free service. LinkedIn started when I was an undergrad, like it was my junior or senior year. And as I very willfully say, I keep a copy of my undergrad transcript in my office, and now I keep a digital version on my laptop desktop, because every once in a while I have that student who's like, man, I'm not gonna be able to do anything. My GPA is terrible. I'm like, oh, I got something to show you. And the important part is, get the best GPA you can. Like, I don't want people to say, hey, this career counselor told me I can get a bad GPA. Like, no, like get the best GPA you can. But we can still make this work. Experience is the great equalizer when you're an undergrad. I have plenty of students who graduate, again, get the best GPA you can. I have plenty of students who graduate with 2-point-something GPAs, but they have a lot of experience and they get great job offers, but they also know more about who they are and how to navigate these things and, move into those spaces. So I completely lost track of what I was saying. But, again, it's going back to like that career exploration piece, which I keep just pounding and pounding in. So for these students, get out there and network, right? Even if you know exactly what you want to do, like you've known since 8, you wanted to be an attorney, which that's literally my wife. She knew since she was 8, she wanted to be an attorney. And she's from Fayetteville. She grew up in Fayetteville, went to Douglas Byrd High School, and knew she wanted to be an attorney since she was 8. She went to NC State. She was a Park Scholar. She was all these amazing things. We were 180-degree different students. It's a miracle that we met in undergrad. And so, and she became an attorney and practiced law for 5 years and now works at, a law school, and she doesn't practice law anymore. But, so even if you know exactly what you want to do, get some experience like adjacent to that. Don't only focus on those experiences. And it's going to make you a more interesting candidate for the other things that you want to do, because you might realize you don't like certain things. I had a student, super brilliant, amazingly brilliant student. She graduated with like a 4.0 in like microbiology or something like that. Just super brilliant. Wanted to go to med school, can go to med school if she wanted to, but realized when she got out, when she got a job as a medical assistant, and she didn't like touching people.
Oh,
that's, this is something that you can find out in undergrad. They focused on research and they were great at research. And the student was brilliant, but like really focused on like one specific experience and focused on grades, which is fine. But if you get like a range of experiences, you start to learn other interests and things that you have. And so like, don't have tunnel vision. You know, you're a generalist with a bachelor's degree, get a wealth of experience. But then, you know, you hear those other students who are like, well, I'm interested in everything. What do I do? That's me. That's my ADHD as well. And so what's hard for those students is it feels like if I pick this thing that I'm interested in, I'm neglecting all these other things I have interest in. And, you know, what if I'm neglecting the thing that is really the thing that catapults my career? And that is a very common feeling. It's a feeling that I had for a long time. And what I realized is I was good at my sales career, you know, for the most part. I was pretty good at it. There was also things I really didn't like. It paid me well. But, you know, I wanted to do something that aligned with my real interests and my real strengths. And if I despite me having all these things I'm interested in, if I picked any of those things on that list, it was better than what I was doing previously. So why am I putting so much effort into like, well, I can't pick this because then I'm neglecting this, but I'm not doing any of them now. So let me just pick one. And what happens when you pick one and you dedicate time towards that, you are now working in an area that you honestly like. You are now working in an area that you are honestly good at, that people pay you for. And like, you're going to get recognition. It's kind of like invigorating to do these things. So you're going to be good at it. People are going to notice and they're going to give you opportunities. And then you get opportunities through that to get into those other areas of interest. There's a lot of ambiguity in this, you know, and that's what really hurts a lot of students. And so I try to encourage students to embrace ambiguity. Like that's the hard. You've been in school all your life. You know that if you do the classwork, you do the reading, you do these things, you're probably going to get a certain grade. But in the world outside of academics, you can do it, which I intentionally did not say the real world because I hate that term. The world outside of academics, you can do all the right things and maybe a recession happens. You lose your job. Like, you don't have control. So that learning how to embrace ambiguity and just kind of accepting that you just got to worry about right now and just do those right things. And it's going to pay off. It might not look the way that you want, but if you are thinking about things critically, you are weighing the benefits and the costs, you're doing some homework and talking to other people and exploring these things, that's what a right decision looks like as an adult. You know, it's a thoughtful, intentional process, and that is a healthy career development experience.
Well, you have given us so much food for thought this evening. I think anyone that is in that stage of career exploration, awareness, development, at whatever age they may be, will certainly be able to go back and look at this and find pieces there that will help them move forward. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thrilled that I was, able to get you on tonight. Because my thing when I moved here is I wanted to be a career advisor at a college and couldn't get a job.
Right. Yeah, higher ed's so weird like that. It really is.
It was crazy. So I said, all right, I got to do something, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I love what I'm doing. So
you're awesome at it. Like it's crazy how those things work out. Like, you would have been absolutely amazing at whatever school that took you, but then it didn't work out, and now you're doing this other thing, and that wouldn't have happened if that didn't happen.
I know. So, it's so true. I said I have to look at this divine intervention and that I'm where I'm supposed to be. So one of the things I like to do, Wesley, whenever I have a guest on, is that I love books. I'm the chair of the board of trustees for our local library system, and I think literacy is like so important. So I always talk about a book just before we end. So I was trying to find one. I said, what book can I showcase that kind of is along the realm where he does So this is one of my favorite books that I've come in contact with, and I actually met the author through LinkedIn, which is like so fun. Cool. So this is called Her STEM Career: Adventures of 51 Remarkable Women. And what I love about it is Diane Propsner, who's the author. showcases these 51 women in so many different STEM careers. I mean, I learned about careers that I didn't know existed in STEM. So
Yeah.
have a young woman or even a male, because, this information is still good, who said, I want to do something in science, I want to do something in technology, but I don't know what it is. And I said, okay, so let's kind of go through this book. I'll let you borrow it, go through it, look at it. And I just want to let people know this book is actually on sale this month on Amazon. I don't get any kickback on it or anything, but
That looks like a good book. I've not heard of that book. I definitely want to read that book.
It is, and I mean, she talks to women who are, applied physicists, system safety engineers, analytical chemists, wildlife veterinarian. I mean,
yeah,
so many different things. And I just said, oh my God, I said, this just gives you a good idea of what's out there. So that's my book for this evening. So what last bit of advice would you give to someone, undergraduate, graduate, or even just some adult that's in the throes of maybe a career transition? What last bit of advice would you want to give to them?
So, for that undergraduate student, or even graduate student, or even high school student, use the resources that are around you, right? And I know that can kind of be a privileged statement because some people have more resources at their disposal than others. But if you're at a school, and you're in North Carolina or wherever, like there's some resources there. Use those resources and ask those resources what are some other things that you can get connected with to learn more. The key is really career exploration, which is a process of understanding yourself. And you just don't know what's out there. Like if you're a young person, us older folks know this, accept the fact that you just don't know everything. Like we don't know everything. I'm earning a doctorate degree and I understand that there is so very little that I know, so very, very little that I know. And you learn these things from reaching out and talking to other people and asking them about their journeys. You learn these things by using your resources and getting feedback from people. But to be intentional about the process. Don't just sit in your classes and try to get the grades so you can graduate. Don't just get a job for the sake of getting a job. And I understand sometimes you need to, especially in this economy. But think about those skills that you get. I don't care if you're waiting tables. I don't care if you're bagging groceries. I don't care if you're delivering groceries. Like there are skills that are involved with that. There are transferable skills, and you need to think intentionally about what those skills are, how you can communicate those skills effectively, whether through written language or through verbal communication, and just work on understanding yourself. And what do you want from life? And really, it's the same thing to an older professional who's looking at a career change, just like I did and millions of others of adults do. The first thing is like, you're not alone. This is normal. We have 3 to 4 careers over a lifetime in the US. It's a great thing. Start with an assessment of understanding what skills and strengths that you have that you've gained from your previous experiences that you've had, and what are the things that you really like from your previous jobs that you've had? What are the things that you really don't like? We put so much value into understanding what we want, we forget that it's really important to know what we don't want too. And it can be more important sometimes, right? And and LinkedIn is a great tool. Like almost all of us should be at home, and using LinkedIn to find people. There's the alumni tool. You can find your university, but you can even use that same tool on a business's page that says people. And you can click on that tab, and you can search through people who have similar educational background or doing things that you just find interesting. Just send a message. Hi, I saw your background. I had a similar area of education. I think what you're doing is really interesting. Could I just talk to you for 15 minutes over the phone, over email? Like, you're going to have to get uncomfortable if you want to get unstuck and move this transition, and just be open to talk to people. You might not be wowed by everyone's advice, but you're going to get something from those conversations. And it's a process. It is a process. And don't limit yourself by telling yourself what the end of that process has to look like. Be open to the fact that you might end up being a career counselor at a university and you didn't even know that job existed. Right? So, be open to the possibilities.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I think this is going to be one of those college conversations that people are going to go back and be able to look at a number of times and get a nugget of information every time they look at it. So I really thank you for the time that you spent doing this, because I learned a few things. This is
I did
definitely
too. I'm getting that book.
this is definitely something I'll be sharing with my students and with other people in my network, because I think you have such, great information for folks. And, I really encourage all undergraduates, I tell my kids, hey, when you get to that college campus, you need to send me a picture of you in the Career Center.
Oh, that's awesome. Do that.
So thank you so much. We actually have, so Debelina actually said, thank you.
You are very welcome, Debelina. Debelina is someone who's I know has also done a career change, but I don't want to put that out. That is Dr. Debelina is right there. So
okay. So thank you so much, Debelina, for hanging in there with us for this time. And folks that are watching this either now or on the replay, please make sure you share this out with other people, because I think you're going to find so much information in here that you can use repeatedly. So again, thank you so much, Wesley. You just hang on for a minute while I end this broadcast. And folks, I will see you next Monday with another College Conversations, where we will be talking to Chef Lou. Those of you in Fayetteville know him. He's the owner of Elite Catering, and he has an associate's degree in culinary management. So join us next week to hear all about Chef Lou. And again, thank you so much, Wesley, for joining us. Much appreciated.
My pleasure completely. I will always answer the call of Dr. Wilkerson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. See you next week, folks.